Good afternoon and welcome. Sorry for the delay, but we had a few business items to take care of. My name is John Rogers, and I am an environmental manager for the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. It is Tuesday, February 11th, 2020, and we are meeting in the Department of Natural Resource Building in Salt Lake City, Utah. I have been appointed by the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining to act as a hearing officer in this matter. The matter is a request for agency action, docket number 2020-004, cause number 475-01, for the order granting XCL Resources LLC an exception location for the Butcher Butte number 31-144H-21 well located in section 30 and 31 of Township 2 South, Range 1 West, Uinta Special Meridian in Uinta County, Utah. The proceedings are being broadcast on the Department of Natural Resources YouTube channel. XCL has requested a motion to leave for file a request for agency action out of time and ask for an order designating a hearing officer and set a hearing date on the week of February 10th through 14th. The board granted that motion, and that is why we're here today. We'll take appearances of counsel at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and thank you for agreeing to do this today. Mitch Mayo on behalf of XCL Resources, LLC.
Thomas Kessinger, Assistant Attorney General for the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining.
Gordon Rowe, Assistant Attorney General for the Hearing Examiner.
We'll proceed to Mr. Mayo, and if you have witnesses, would you like to swear them in at this time?
Thank you. Yes, I do have witnesses appearing on the screen for those of us in the room and those on YouTube probably as well. From my right to left, if you'd raise your hand, Kevin Annenson, Vice President of Business Development and Land for XCL Resources. Josh Sigler, Vice President of Geology. And correct me if I get any of this wrong. And to his side is Tom Castens, Vice President of Drilling. None of these witnesses have appeared before the board. XCL is a new operator here. I'm not sure to the extent they're going to need to be qualified as expert witnesses for this hearing, but if they do, I'm happy to qualify them at that point. Otherwise, could the court reporter please swear the witnesses in?
Will you raise your right hands, please? You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Will you guys raise your hands and say, I do one more time? We had a technical issue there.
I do.
I do.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll proceed, Mr. Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. We really appreciate everyone here today. I know how much work goes into putting together one of these hearings on an off day, and we really appreciate it. As you know, my name is Mitch Mayo of Lear & Lear, PLLC, and I represent XCL Resources in this matter. The resumes of Mr. Annenson, Mr. Sigler, and Mr. Castens have been submitted as petitioners, Exhibits D, E, and F for this cause. XCL is a new operator in Utah, and therefore none of these witnesses have appeared before, but they plan to offer a mix of fact and expert witness testimony as necessary to establish the cause. Before I begin, I just want to make sure that everyone's received those two supplemental exhibits G and H that we submitted last week, I believe.
Yes, the division was in receipt of those exhibits.
Thank you.
Yes, the hearing examiner also has those.
Okay, perfect. As is standard practice before the board, and I'm assuming preferred here today, I'll wait to admit all the exhibits till the close of my case in chief.
It'll be fine.
Okay. By way of background, I'll try and keep this somewhat brief. XCL is here today seeking an exception location to drill the Butcher Butte number 31-144H-21 well, which is located in sections 30 and 31 in Township 2 South, 1 West. What XCL, the Butcher Butte well is a long lateral horizontal well that is spaced under the board's order in docket 2016-001, cause number 139-138, and I might refer to that as the 139-138 order in this matter. The 139-138 order authorizes the Butcher Butte well as a long lateral horizontal well with, relevant to this hearing, 560-foot east-west boundary setbacks. For ease of reference, the order is attached, the spacing order is attached as Exhibit D to the request for agency action in this matter. XCL is here today seeking an exception location only to the east setback for the well. They are not seeking an exception to the north, south, or west setbacks for that well. This exception location is necessitated by unexpected complications encountered downhole during the drilling of the well. By way of brief background, in December of 2019, XCL entered into a PSA with Axia Energy II to purchase Axia's oil and gas interests in Utah. While Axia still owned the asset, it successfully drilled 4 of 5 planned wells in Section 30 and 31. Axia then began drilling the 5th well, the Butcher Butte well that's at issue in this cause, approximately 560 feet from the east section line, as allowed by the board's spacing order in 139-138. Just hours before closing on the PSA, XCL was notified of serious technical issues related to the 5th wellbore, which I'll call the failed wellbore for this, for clarity in this hearing, and began trying to determine how and if it could save the wellbore, as drilled in the current location. As you will hear from Mr. Castens in detail, the well likely cannot be saved at this point, and we won't know until a drilling rig is on site and downhole significantly. That is why we are here today seeking an exception location for the Butcher Butte well. The board has authority to authorize this exception location pursuant to Utah Code Ann 40-6-5, subsection 3B, and Utah Administrative Code Rule R 649-3-3. Rule 649-3-3 allows for the division to administratively grant an exception location for a well, but only if you are able to get 100% of the working interest of the owners, as that term's defined in the statutes, in the offset DSU to sign written consent approving the same. Because there are unlocatable mineral interests in the adjoining DSU that have been force pooled by Axia in the past, we were unable to secure 100% of the written consent. That is why we're here. Nevertheless, XCL has received written consent from approximately 99% of the owners in the offset DSU to the operations that are outlined here today. In the absence of receiving that full 100% consent, we are here today at this hearing. The board has jurisdiction over this matter pursuant, I think I already did that, and the division did not file any memorandum in this cause, and XCL has not received any objections to this request to date. With that, I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Kevin Annenson. Mr. Annenson, please state your full name and business address for the record, please.
Sure. It's Kevin Annenson, and the way you spell my last name is Anonsen. Our business address is 3217 Montrose Boulevard, Suite 200, Houston, Texas 77006.
Okay, and what is your current position with XCL?
I am the Vice President of Business Development and Land.
Okay. Do you exercise a supervisory role over the land records associated with the subject well?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Just for clarification for counsel in the room, I don't anticipate Mr. Annenson offering any expert testimony. He's a land witness. Assuming that's okay, we'll proceed.
Yeah, no objections from the division.
Okay. Would you please, Mr. Annenson, provide the XCL's corporate and bonding status for us?
Sure. XCL is a Delaware limited liability company in good standing with its principal place of business, which is Houston, Texas. XCL is fully bonded with all relevant federal, Indian, and state of Utah agencies.
Okay. Thank you. I'm now going to show you exhibits G, H, and Exhibit A, and I apologize that they are in an order that makes it not. Do you recognize those 3 exhibits, Mr. Annenson?
I do.
Okay. And did you or someone under your direction or supervision prepare those exhibits?
Yes.
Okay. The type on these is incredibly small, and I apologize for that. We've had a difficult time, but what I will do is highlight the areas we're talking about with the cursor. If there's any confusion or questions, please let me know. Beginning with Exhibit G. Please orient the board and help the hearing examiner and help him orient himself as to where we are and what's going on in this map.
Yep, sure thing. So this is a Plat Locator Map, and what it is depicting sections 30 and 31 in Township 2 South, 1 West. As you can tell, we're about a mile southwest of Roosevelt, approximately about 2 miles east of, how do you say that, Ioka? Is that town, is that how you pronounce that? And then you can also tell, or you can also see that's Highway 40 that runs right through the highlighted red section, which is sections 30 and 31.
Okay. And now Exhibit H.
Give me 1 second. Got to get my high resolution picture over here.
Appreciate it. Please,
Okay.
Please describe this exhibit for the board.
Sure. So essentially what this is it's a closer look of sections 30 and 31, which is outlined in red. What you have there with the gray hash mark, that is the current setbacks established by the current board's spacing, which is the 560 feet.
And so just to clarify, Mr. Annenson, the east-west setbacks here and here are 560 feet. The heel toe are 330 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what are these lines depicted kind of running throughout here?
So those are all the well bores. The well bore, as I think you called it earlier, the feld well bore. Mm-hmm. That is the well bore that is closest to the east section line.
Is that this little?
I'm sorry.
Can you see the screen here, Mr. Annenson?
I can. Yep.
Okay. Is that
That's
this
it right there?
red line?
The
right
red one.
Okay.
The red solid and the red dash, and then the red dash is the sidetrack.
Okay.
We're requesting. The well right next to it, there to the west, the blue one, okay. That is the current producing Castle Peak well.
Okay.
And then as you march west, those are the remaining wells that we are have drilled or currently drilling.
Okay. And over here you've got depicted, this is, sections 29 and 32 of 2 South 1 West, is that correct?
That's correct. And then as you can tell, the other cross-hatched around that DSU there, or unit, is the actual setbacks, the same as depicted in 30 and 31, and it has the same exact setbacks established by the commission as 30 and 31.
Okay. You've also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Let me see that again. Apologize. There we go. On sections 29 and 32, I see two lines depicted on there. There's a line depicted here and a line depicted here. Can you please explain what those are?
Sure. So the red solid line, yep, right there. Yep, that is the current producing well in the unit, and then the dashed line would be one of the currently permitted wells in the unit.
Okay, so this dashed line here, that would represent the closest a well bore could be located to the well that we're here discussing today.
That's correct.
Okay, so just to reiterate, this is the well in 29 and 32 that is quote-unquote holding these sections. And there are no other drilled long lateral wells in this section depicted.
That's correct.
In sections 30 and 31, this blue line, is it your testimony that that is a well that is currently producing in these?
That's correct.
Okay. And the other five, the green on the far west, the purple in the middle, the yellow, and this red, those are the other wells that have been drilled in these lands and are awaiting completion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sorry, we got an ambulance coming by. I'm sure it's going to get loud here for a second. There we go.
Thank you. Can you please tell us, Mr. Anderson, who the owners are, as that term is defined? Who are the owners in the offset DSU?
Sure. So let me get up here. So in sections, townships 2 south, 1 west, 2932 being the offset unit. The owners are obviously XCL, XCL, we acquired from XCL. CH4 Finley. We'll kind of group all these together. Newfield and Canna, I guess now they're Oventive.
Mm-hmm.
So they still list title as a Newfield, but I think all that's getting turned into Oventive.
Okay.
And then Altamont. And
Altamont Energy Partners.
I'm sorry?
Altamont Energy Partners.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And we do have, to your comment earlier on the 99%, we have received letters from Newfield, or I guess Oventive, from Altamont. And so that makes up, including ourselves, XCL, that makes up 99%. We have spoke with CH4 Finley, and they did not object to the operations.
Okay.
We just had some wordsmithing type things where we never really got the letter signed, but they did not object to it.
Okay, so I'm going to back up one step. In addition to those owners, those operator owners, there's also some portion, about 1/4%, as I understand it, that is unleased or unlocatable or difficult to locate mineral owners in sections 29 and 32. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so together with the operator owners that you discussed,
Yep.
CH4 Finley and Canna, Altamont, and the unleased mineral owners, did you send any sort of letter requesting their consent to this operations to those identified owners?
That's correct. We sent letters, the same letters that we sent to all the operators, just adjusting from working interest partner to mineral owner. We sent certified letters to all those guys, and it was 0.2%,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, so to be clear on the record, all the operator owners have consented in writing, except for CH4 Finley. Do you know about what percent ownership CH4 Finley has in the offset DSU?
Yes, they have 0.83%.
Okay, so collectively, roughly 1% has not given written consent.
That is correct.
Okay. Did CH4 at any time, you said they have not objected at all to the operations?
That is correct.
Okay. Now I'd like you to take a look at Exhibit A, if we could. Exhibit A is supposed to be a more visible version of Exhibit H, but it looks about the same, and I apologize for that. Tell the board what this does. I know we've gone through what these wells are, but the hearing examiner, help him orient. What are these 5 wells depicted, and why is it important that this well be drilled at this time in this location?
I'm sorry, Mitch. Can you repeat that one more time? You kind of broke up a little bit.
That's right. I apologize. This is another plat map showing sections in 30 and 31. Can you tell the board, we've already talked about what these wells are. Can you help the board understand, or excuse me, the hearing examiner, can you help the hearing examiner understand exactly what the operational plan is from a land perspective, why these 5 wells are being drilled at this time, and why this well, the Butcher Butte well, needs to be drilled in this location at this time?
Yeah, so this is just to kind of depict a little bit. This is the more zoomed in photo or exhibit of that unit. And the reason why we need to go back and drill this unit or this well now is because we're currently finishing up drilling on the other wells. Therefore, we would need to go drill it now as opposed to moving the rig somewhere else. Just because of, and I'll let the experts more speak to this, but as far as rigging up and operations wise, and to be economic, it makes more sense for us to drill it now as opposed to moving the rig and then coming back later, especially when it comes to completions, schedules, and things of that sort.
Okay. Let me ask you maybe a better question here. This red line, the Butcher Butte well, the failed well bore that we're talking about
That's
here,
correct.
it is the easternmost well bore that's allowed under the spacing order. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so if this well bore were not able to be produced in its location, is there anywhere to the west that it could be moved?
No, there is not.
Okay, and why is that? That in the request you allege that it would decrease ultimate productivity from both, and in some ways really hinder the overall development scheme. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. We've got a bad echo here, but I'll take a stab at it, but I'll let the experts kind of talk a little bit more to it. But
Okay.
essentially, we want to have it spaced far enough from the actual current producer, hence magnetic interference, different things like that. But we feel like if we get too close to that well, then we would be draining reservoir that we didn't otherwise want to do.
Okay. And so we cannot, XCL is in a place where they cannot move this well bore to the east without getting into the setbacks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mayo, can I just have a point of clarification?
Please, yeah.
Have you drilled, how long of the horizontal of this failed wellbore have you drilled? The whole length of it or just partial?
Tom, that might be a question for you.
Yes, so the failed wellbore was drilled to total depth,
Okay.
which a bottom hole of 330 feet from the north line. At that point, the liner was run all the way to TD, and during the cement job, and this happened right before closing, but the cement or a mechanical obstruction locked up as the rig switched over to displacement. At that point, they could no longer displace the cement, so the decision was made to essentially circulate the cement out of the drill string so that they wouldn't lose the drill string as well. And essentially what they did is circulated that out, set the liner top packer, which basically sealed the backside and prevented any further circulation. And so what they left us was a liner full of cement and a backside that you couldn't circulate.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. With that, if there are no questions, I'll turn to Mr. Castens.
Yeah, I've got a few questions for Mr. Ananson.
Okay.
I'd just like to turn your attention to Exhibit C, if you would.
Okay.
And I believe you mentioned this in your previous testimony, but I just want to confirm. You sent a certified letter to each of these individuals or entities on Exhibit C requesting consent?
Oh gosh, you're looking at Exhibit C on the request for agency action.
Oh.
Sorry. Can I answer on his behalf?
I assume it's this list, Mitch.
That's right. On the request for agency action, there was an Exhibit C where we identified all the owners, unleased mineral interests, unlocatable mineral interests, and working interest partners who you, I guess the question is, did you mail notice to all of those people identified on that exhibit?
That is correct.
All right. And what portion, I believe I've got 16 entities here listed. Which portion of them are unlocatable versus did not consent? Or is it impossible to determine because there's no response?
Yeah, so we sent out all 16 letters-ish, whatever it equates out to. And we heard back from one person with like a 0.002 net acres. And when they actually called, they had called and said, "Oh, hey, we want a lease." And so they weren't worried about the operations or anything like that. So that was the only person that we heard from and knew that point that was locatable, because everybody else, per all the records we had and reaching out previously, have been unlocatable.
Okay. There's one entity I'd like to focus on, and just get a little bit more clarification on, because it's not an individual, it's the Roosevelt City Corporation. I'd just like to discuss what efforts were made to contact the city itself, or the city corporation.
Sure. So they're showing in our records as a 0.02 net acres, and we sent a letter to 255 South State Street, Roosevelt, Utah, and we have not heard anything back from them. We sent a certified letter to those guys.
Is it typical that if something is like a city or, a corporation, you would reach out to them by phone, or is it always handled through certified mail?
In my past, we've sent it certified mail.
Yeah, and Thomas, that might be my doing. The statutes require mailing, and the best way to prove it is by notice. So that's probably my advice, to send it by mail.
Okay, and I guess it's fairly certain that they received the letter? You never received the return receipt?
I don't believe we've received that one yet, but I can confirm that and get back to you after the hearing. I've got the list at the office.
I just thought it was interesting because they're in the heart of oil country and in the basin, and you think they would be interested in these, but if they were provided notice, then they're not taking advantage of that. I can't speak for them. All right, well, I think that's all the questions I had for Mr. Annenson.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Thank you. Mr. Castens, please identify yourself, raise a hand just so we know which one you are again, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. This is a point, Mr. Castens going to offer general testimony on the operations, the drilling side. If division or board would like, I'm happy to try and qualify Mr. Castens as an expert. If you believe expert testimony is necessary, or we can stipulate, or we can simply have him as a fact witness.
I think we should err on the side of caution and go through some foundation for expert testimony.
Sounds great. Mr. Castens, I'm going to turn to your resume, if that's okay, and have you kind of walk through with me. Give me a little bit of background, if you would. First of all, please state your name, your full name, and your business address for the record.
My name is Tom Castens, business address 3217 Montrose Boulevard, Suite 200, Houston, Texas 77006.
Okay, and what is your current position with XCL?
I'm the vice president of drilling.
Okay. Your resume is included as Exhibit E. It's up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it here before you now, but I'm going to go through and qualify you as an expert, if that's okay. I'm going to ask you some questions and just have you kind of explain your history and experience to us. Could you tell us a little bit about your education background, where you went to college, what sorts of degrees you have, what you studied, etc.?
Yes, sir. I went to the Colorado School of Mines from 2006 to 2010 and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering.
Okay. Did you do any formal academic study after that, or have you been working in the field?
Now, during college, I worked for both Apache Corporation and EOG Resources in the summers, and that was the extent of outside of school activities during that time.
Okay. And since you graduated in 2010, where did you work after that? And what were your responsibilities?
I took a full-time job with EOG Resources and started off in the Fort Worth division, working the Barnett Shale. And there I did drilling, completions, production, and reservoir engineering. From there, I moved to North Dakota, also with EOG Resources, and drilled in the Williston Basin. Actually sitting drill sites as a drilling foreman. After that, went to Wyoming and drilled in the Powder River Basin and the northern DJ Basin in Laramie County.
Was that also
From
with,
there,
that also was with the EOG? Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That was also with EOG Resources. From there, I moved into the office where I managed anywhere from 1 to 3 rigs at any time in the Williston Basin, the Powder River Basin, the DJ Basin, and even drilled a couple wells in the Uinta Basin. I also spent a year with EOG Resources drilling in China. We had a small play there, and they sent me over there to drill a few wells.
Okay. Does XCL rely on your expertise in drilling operations?
Yes, sir.
And do you stay involved on a day-to-day basis in drilling operations? Obviously not out in the field, but
Yes, sir. I write the procedures, and the rig reports directly to me.
okay. Any voir dire or questions from the council?
Other than curiosity about what it was like to work in China in this industry, I don't have any objections to him being qualified as a witness.
We accept Mr. Castens as an expert witness.
Okay, appreciate that. Back to some questions now, Mr. Castens. I'd like to pull up Exhibit A again. We've seen this before, but now I'm going to ask from a drilling perspective, kind of some of the questions that I asked Mr. Annenson. As we've discussed, as I've stated here, there were some technical issues that were unforeseen right around closing. And so one of your first duties, I would imagine, as an XCL drilling operations guy, is to figure out what happened, what's going on, how to fix it. Tell us, you've already told us about the cemented casing and isolation packer getting stuck on the backside, and essentially there being a problem with circulation. At that point in time, when you first learned of this, did you believe that it was going to be possible at all to salvage this failed wellbore?
No, sir. Although not impossible, we felt like the odds were pretty slim without lots of capital exposure. And so, especially the fact that the liner had to be rotated down, even milling over the liner top packer, attempting to drill out cement and pull it. Like I said, although not impossible, we perceived it as unlikely, and that the best alternative would be to drill a new lateral.
Okay. And when you say it would be not impossible, but very unlikely without significant capital exposure, let me see if I can ask it in a way that I understand and see if you can give me some feedback. Is what you're saying, we may be able to drill it out once the rig is there, but it's such a low probability that if we put a rig on site, drilled down and encountered that we could not drill this wellbore, we'd have to pull the rig off and then go back before the board to get an exception location at a later date, and that would expose you to those downhole costs of that failed salvage attempt.
Yes, sir. Both with the pressure that was seen when the liner was run and while drilling the well, and along with the hook load that would be required to either try to pull the liner or remediate it, we need to have the big rig there to try and salvage the current wellbore, which would be best for XCL and our working interest partners.
Sure.
But since there is a large enough likelihood that that would not be the case, we wanted to be a prudent operator, and if we are unsuccessful trying to salvage that, we wanted to have an exception so that we could sidetrack and re-drill the lateral to the east.
Okay, so just to be clear, XCL's preference and what they're hoping to do is bring the rig back on, clean out this wellbore, and produce from the 560-foot setback position. That's the preferred alternative.
Yes, sir.
It's just a very diminished possibility that that can happen.
Yes, sir. There's a large enough percentage chance that it won't happen that we would not move the rig back there without having an exception to drill sidetrack to the east.
Okay. Now you've requested 460 foot, an extra 100 feet to the east to drill. Is there a reason you picked that 460 foot?
So the best place to sidetrack is about 11,100 feet is the spot that we chose along with directional. That also happens to be the pinch point up against the setback.
Okay.
And so when you perform an open hole sidetrack, essentially you're a little bit blind and you're going to produce a big dog leg, and we would have to come off that to the east. And so the pinch point there, you have to get further than 30 to 40 feet for magnetic interference, and that puts us right on the setback and just past the setback line.
Okay, can you see the screen, Mr. Castens?
Yes, sir.
Is this the pinch point you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the idea is if you're able to get a rig back on site, and if this is approved, you'll drill down. If you encounter problems and are unable to come to get past those, what you'll have to do is, my cursor went away, there we go, is essentially drill out from here, and because of the need to get distance to avoid magnetic interference, you might be able to stay within the setbacks, but most likely you would be into the setbacks in some way.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Let me look really quickly at, I guess we'll stay on Exhibit A. Let me, sorry, let me orient myself for a minute. So this is, there are 5 wells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that are part of this planned development. I believe we called them planned wells in the request for agency action. Can you please talk through whatever you're comfortable with that isn't proprietary or, secret sauce? Is there any reason these 5 wells are coming on now? Is there a reason operationally that moving this well to the west doesn't make sense, but moving it to the east does?
Yes, from Axia Energy did a great job proving up the acreage and drilling standalone wells to hold acreage in units. XCL's underwriting and why we acquired this position was to do full field development and fully develop the minerals. To do that effectively, we need to confer what the proper spacing is within a bench. And the other part of that is to co-develop. One thing we saw looking around really every basin is there's a lot of parent-child interference. And so it's very important that when you do develop a unit, both vertically and laterally, that you drill and complete them at the same time to maximize the recovery.
Okay. Okay. And moving it to the west, does that in some way get the wells, essentially this blue well here, this next closest well, does it make them too close so that the test is less effective? Is that the idea behind?
Yes, it's kind of a double whammy there because you're moving it closer to being under the one parent well in the section, as well as tighter than we project lateral spacing to be on the next well in the same zone.
And the blue well is the parent well for all of us here because that is the well that is producing currently. The other 4 are the children, other 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you say test the spacing, this has been spaced under Order 139-138. That is a pilot program spacing order, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that, essentially, the spacing orders that the board enters are largely for that, so companies can go out and test to see what the appropriate spacing is in the area. That's not a question. I apologize. I realized I didn't end that with a question. And so what XCL is trying to do is take that spacing order and put it into play on Axia's asset that is now acquired to see how that spacing order may need to be tweaked or modified to fully develop these with minimal waste and protecting correlative rights. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
So in your, just to clarify, the exceptional location is necessary because this wellbore cannot be drilled. There is a high likelihood that this wellbore cannot be drilled and completed within the exceptions, and we'll get into that eastern setback.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Can you tell really quickly what kind of from an operational standpoint, what the the surface location, if this exception is granted, what the surface location, the terminus, what the plans are for this well?
Yes, if the exception location is granted, that'll allow us to move the big rig back onto the wellbore, and the first attempt would be to try and salvage, although it's not high chance, we would still try and salvage the original wellbore. If that was unable, we would use the existing intermediate casing, and the productive interval would commence at a location of 330 feet from the south line and 460 feet from the east line in the southeast quarter of section 31, with a terminus 330 feet from the north line and 460 feet from the east line in the northeast quarter of section 30. The lateral will be drilled and perforated in the Wasatch 5 member of the Wasatch Formation, encased and cemented from the surface location to the 330-foot north setback.
Okay. And you said this well, this Butcher Butte well that we're here discussing today, this is targeting the Wasatch Formation, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And the parent well you said was a Castle Peak well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so if this exception location were not granted, would XCL likely be able to, or would they be willing to invest the capital to see if the wellbore could be salvaged?
No, sir. To meet the completion schedule and XCL's plans to develop the unit, if we're unable to move the rig back by February 20th, then essentially that would become a well that would not be economic. Essentially, it would be the result of parent-child interference, and once we completed the other 4, that location on the east side of that section in the Wasatch member would not be viable.
Okay.
In our expertise.
Okay. And what kind of timeline, just for clarification, is XCL looking at with respect to actually bringing these wells onto completion? And again, whatever you're comfortable with telling us.
Yes, sir. The plan would be to move the rig back immediately, and the completion and ensuing production would be sometime this summer.
Okay. So you've got a couple months to work with as far as bringing the well onto production.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think that's, one last question. Actually, I think we're good. That's all I have for you, unless Mr. Kessinger has questions for you.
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions, hopefully. So in terms of the existing setback now, the eastern setback at 560 feet, how conservative do you think that is in terms of the protection of correlative rights?
I'd probably leave it up to Josh, our geologist, more on the spacing and reservoir side, how that affects how that setback is.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
If you prefer, I can answer now, or after I can discuss after being sworn in.
Yeah, I think if the question is better directed towards yourself, then I'll just wait to hear your testimony, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
And then in terms of production, I just want to confirm that the drilling of the well will happen most likely in the next few weeks, but production from that well will not occur until early summertime.
Yes, production. It's frac timing as far as getting a fleet scheduled and out there once the completion of the drilling.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions?
No further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Castens. Mr. Sigler, please state your full name and business address for the record.
My name is Josh Sigler, and my business address is 3217 Montrose Boulevard, Suite 200, here in Houston, Texas, and our zip code is 77006.
Okay, and what is your current position with XCL?
I'm the Vice President of Geology.
Okay. Would the board or the hearing examiner and division like Mr. Sigler to be qualified as an expert as well? We're happy to do it.
Yeah, I think that would be important in this case.
Okay. I'm going to turn to your resume then, Mr. Sigler, and have you go through kind of the same exercise we did with Tom. Introduce yourself educationally and experience-wise to the folks here. Start off with your education, would you? What kind of college, postgraduate have you worked on?
Absolutely. I obtained a Bachelor's of Science in Geology from Mount Union College, where I graduated magna cum laude. From there, I went to the University of Wyoming and received a Master's of Science in Geology there. That was in 2008. From there, I went to work for ExxonMobil Corporation, where I worked in a number of positions, working primarily deep water projects from Angola to the Gulf of Mexico, as well as several onshore projects. At that time, I went to Wild Horse Resources, working in capacity as a geologist there, drilling horizontal wells in both North Louisiana and East Texas, drilling a number of different exploratory and development scenarios, placing horizontals in multiple different targets, serving in multiple different roles from asset evaluation to horizontal geosteering.
Okay. And does XCL rely on your expertise for geologic concerns?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And are you familiar with the lands we're discussing today and the geology underlying the lands?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any questions, Tom, or?
Yeah, I just have one question, I think. In terms of your work experience, how much has it dealt with horizontal drilling?
The past 7 years or so of my career have primarily been focused on in the U.S. onshore environment drilling horizontal wells. So I actually was an instrumental part of Wild Horse Resources program to take their East Texas Eagle Ford assets public and began drilling horizontal wells. In that play, I ran 3 different the geologic operations for 3 rigs as part of that drilling program, and I've also previously run about 5 rigs of an 8-rig program in North Louisiana as part of Wild Horse Resources 1's horizontal drilling campaign in the Terryville asset in North Louisiana.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I don't have any objections with qualifying Mr. Siegler as an expert in
We accept
geology.
Mr. Ziegler as a expert witness.
I appreciate it. And this is our final witness for the day, just so people can keep track of what we've got on tap. Mr. Sigler, I'm going to address just a couple of exhibits with you and talk, largely about the questions that Mr. Kessinger asked Mr. Castens a few minutes ago. Essentially, tell us about the geology. This is Exhibit B, and this is Exhibit C. Were these exhibits prepared by you or under someone under your supervision or direction, or where did you get these exhibits from?
Yes, these are exhibits that were prepared by someone under my supervision. We did get these in part from data and some displays that we acquired from Axia Energy as well.
Okay, so Axia may have prepared these for you.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Exhibit B, can you please explain what this is and what it shows? And I'm going to help orient really quickly if I can. Is this sections 30 and 31 that we're here discussing? No, it is not.
If you would slide over to the east just a little bit, right there, correct. So this is a map of the data that we have in our data set that are what we would consider very strongly indicative data sources that show us what the primary horizontal stress is, which effectively means the directions that fractures would open when we hydraulically fracture wells, what direction they open. So you can see from the, again, as you pointed out, section 30 and 31 there, we have a number of data sources, including some image logs that we have in our proprietary data set, several that have also been published as part of the kind of the public data set. And some natural fracture orientations that can also be seen, as well as microseismic data. Using a combination of those different techniques, we can see that there are effectively multiple different regimes here in this portion of the Uinta Basin, what we would probably call the Butcher Butte project area. On the western side, those horizontal stress orientations are oriented a little bit more in a north-south orientation, whereas in the eastern portion of our acreage, which would be applicable here to sections 30 and 31 of 2 south, 1 west, they're more of a northwest-southeast oriented horizontal stress orientation that we actually have pretty good offset control. That's just about a mile and a half to the east there from some log data.
Okay. And offset control, you just mean there's another well nearby that you guys have access to that can help you decide what the orientation is of these fractures.
That's correct.
Okay. And Exhibit C, really quickly, let's go through that. Tell us what this exhibit is and what it shows in your opinion.
Yeah. So further refining that data set down to the level of kind of what one might call more of a single hydraulic fracture, from data we have seen in microseismic, that data shows us a fracture half length of around 300-ish, 311 in this case, feet of growth in both directions, southeast and northwest. And with that, if we are thinking of our 560 foot setback, apologies for a slight typo here, we would then have still a fairly good amount of setback left, where we are not impacting the correlative rights of the mineral owners in the adjacent units. In this case, it would be in 29 and 32.
Okay, so if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like the frac half length is 311 feet, but it's at a northwest southeast orientation. So the
That's
actual
correct.
lateral distance from the wellbore to where it would intersect with the section is on average about 220 feet to the side. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so right now we have 560 foot setbacks. Let's draw a line somewhere right through here. This
Yes, sir.
wellbore, on average, the frac half length will go 220 feet to the side of that.
Correct.
And so if we
Meaning
were
that if we were to go slightly
to
to the east into the setback, we would still, even if we were at 460 feet, we would still have another 240 feet to the lease line, the
Okay.
unit boundary,
based on the average half length.
based on the average.
Okay. And do you anticipate in your geologic experience and knowledge of this area that there would be drainage by moving this over, drainage from the offset DSU by virtue of moving this wellbore, if need be, 60 to 100 feet closer to the section line?
I do not. In these unconventional plays, the rock types that we're accessing here are very tight. They have low levels of porosity and permeability relative to conventional reservoirs that drain larger areas. And as such, we need to use horizontal technology to be able to drain those rocks. And by moving it over, we do not believe that we are draining a significant radius outside of that horizontally stimulated rock volume.
Okay. With that, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Sigler.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I do have a couple of questions. I apologize if they're a bit repetitive of what you just testified to. So in terms of the current eastern setback, 560 feet, in your opinion, is how conservative?
I think it is fairly conservative. I think I've drilled wells in other basins, and obviously every basin is its own has its own geologic parameters. But as close as 330 feet without affecting the rights of correlative owners, and so I think here 560 feet allows us plenty of room.
And so it's your opinion that 460 feet continues to be protective of correlative rights?
That is correct, sir.
And in terms of drainage that occurs beyond the half length, the effective frac half length, what sort of drainage is expected beyond that?
Obviously, that's a very difficult question to fully answer.
Can I pause you just for a second there?
Generally, it's minimal. On the order of probably tens of feet would be my best estimate there.
All right, and I apologize for interjecting in the middle of your answer. You said it was a very difficult question to answer. In terms of what data or elements you need to answer that question, could you just speak to how that question would be answered?
Sure. Ultimately, getting a full look of the volume, we can take the volume of hydrocarbons and that we take out of the ground, and then begin to estimate how much space that takes up in the earth. but truly quantifying the exact geometry that those take up in the earth is truly impossible. But we use techniques like microseismic to then give us roughly an estimate of what sort of volume we've touched with our fractures, and then from there we begin to estimate if we have that volume, how much additional volume we would need to add in to then tell us how much volume beyond those fractures we have drained. Typically, that's a pretty minimal volume, as we estimate it.
All right. And I believe you just testified that you think it would be tens of feet that may be draining outside the effective half
It
length.
tends to a small 100 feet, yes.
And in your opinion, does that that effective drainage extending beyond the half length, does that effectively balance correlative rights with the need to maximize resource recovery?
I believe it does. I think obviously we have the mineral owners that are in the 2932 also are generally in the 30 and 31 unit, and as such, because of the location that would be lost without being able to complete this well, drill and complete this well as part of this package, we would be negatively impacting both those mineral owners as well as the royalty owners themselves. So yes, I believe it's adequately balanced.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
If I can just take one question and clarify, because I think I may have confused things. This exhibit obviously is pulled from something else that is not applicable to this hearing as far as the frac half length and the orientation are, but the labeling, et cetera, is not. This is we need to get this in now. Show me where this so we can discuss it. But I think it's led to a little confusion. So let me just ask you, Josh, Mr. Sigler, to try and clarify what your position is. The distance from the wellbore to the left, let's say in this picture, that it will drain on average is 220 feet away.
Yes, that generally that is the distance that we should see.
Okay. And if we are looking at a 460-foot setback, then that means that we have effectively average drainage we can expect up to, what is 460 minus 220, 240 feet away from the section line. We expect the average half length to reach that spot and drain from that area. Is that
Yes,
correct? Sir. And then you said you expect the anomalous half lengths, those that are longer, to drain from an order of tens of feet and hundreds of feet. And I wanted to clarify, was that from the end of this 220-foot typical drainage? This is not tens or hundreds of feet into the offset DSU. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, it is typically, there's an additional component that might be drained beyond the tip of that, the edge of this typical length. But that would still, even if it were 100 feet of drainage, would still then end up being what in this situation 140 feet from the setback.
Okay, so you don't anticipate drainage, if at all minimal, in the offset DSU.
Absolutely, I do not expect drainage. It would be minimal.
Okay. Thank you. 1 minute. We've got a little consultation going on here with the division.
With permission from the hearing examiner, I would request that Mr. Baza be permitted to ask a question of this witness.
So and maybe I have missed something going along the way, but in the offsetting drilling unit to the east, it appears you're going to have a well, a long lateral well being developed in that area too. And so knowing that you've testified to a significant parent-child relationship, there may be some timing issues as well as the setback issues which will affect recovery from both of the wells in those two adjacent drilling units. Can you talk to that a little bit and how the correlative rights are protected by either drilling quickly or not drilling so quickly? How is that going to be managed?
Sure. I will say the location to the east is a permitted location. It is not currently being developed, and we absolutely believe that it is important to protect the rights of those mineral owners, royalty owners, everyone in sections 29 and 32. And so we do not believe that we're going to be draining in a significant way that section to the exemption of future development over there. It quite generally, we believe that the ability, it's really in order to develop a section, it's important to be able to put a package of wells together to develop it at the same time. And I believe the setbacks are established as such to help us protect that. But we've been quite generous with the setbacks and have, to the data we've seen so far, allows us to continue to protect the rights of correlative mineral owners.
So I assume that goes back to your statement initially, that the setbacks that were established are pretty conservative.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
With that, I don't think we have any further questions.
Okay. Witnesses for the division or anything with that? I believe I'm done with my witnesses and ready to either submit exhibits, respond to witnesses for the division, or offer closing.
Thomas, we'll turn time over to you for a direct testimony if you have any.
All right. The division is not prepared to present any direct testimony or anything of that nature. I will say generally that the division is supportive of this request for agency action, but I do want to be clear that there should be mention in the proposed order and the eventual order that issues that production does not begin until after the time for responses has been provided for in Rule R641113-500.
And Thomas, if
That's
I may,
more of a procedural issue, but I do want to just make that clear.
it might be putting the cart before the horse, but to the extent if the hearing examiner decides that he is interested in recommending granting of this request, we could just stipulate on the record here today that it wouldn't go into effect at the earliest until the board approved it, and then March 10th, depending on what the board decided to do with that. If that's comfortable for.
I would agree to that, just so long as no responses are filed in response to the proposed order that issues.
Understood.
Yes,
Any
hearing.
responses would reset that production clock, and we would go through the normal board process at that point. Okay.
Yeah, and so with that, thank you very much for your testimony today. I look forward to hopefully hearing more from XCL. I thought it was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to just get some points of clarification from me, if that's all right with you. Does the offset operators in section, is it 29 and 32?
Correct. Yep.
Are they, the large operators, are they working interest owners with you in your other wells here? Or do they have an interest in this?
Are you referring to 30 and 31 as well?
Yeah.
That's correct.
I'm saying, do they have an interest in getting your failed well drilled?
Do they have a?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't hear the
Everyone
question.
but Inventive.
I didn't hear the question. What do you say?
Yeah,
Are they interested in
I
what?
think the
Who has
question.
interest in this
Both
well?
units.
Yes, they have interest in both units. Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, maybe I think what he's asking is, can you help him understand? They own interest in both 30 and 31 and 29 and 32. Their written consent is, I guess, in some senses self-serving because they will protect
That's
their
what I'm
minerals
trying-
in 30 and 31, even if it impacts their minerals in 29 and 32.
they obviously said, yeah, it's fine to drill, but they have an interest in it.
Sure.
That's correct. Everyone, so maybe answer differently. Everyone in 29 and 32, the offset unit, also own an interest in 30 and 31, all the working interest owners.
Okay. And then also, I wanted to look at this figure here. We're looking at the red well, which is the failed well. What horizon is that producing out of it? I believe it was the Wasatch 5 you said?
Yes, it's not drilling, or it's not producing, but it was
But
drilled in
that's
the
where
Wasatch
you're,
5.
okay. And what are you producing out of the green well to the west?
This one here.
No, not the green well. I guess it's more of a blue well, isn't it?
one
That
right
one,
here.
yeah, right there.
That is the Castle Peak, which is uphole.
And how much is the vertical distance there?
Greater than 400 feet.
So do you think there would be, if you drilled closer, would there be any interaction between those two well bores, even though they're separated vertically? I mean, you're not in the same zone, I
Try to
guess.
feel this one. So I think in your typical situation where you actually can see on the west side of that unit, we are drilling a very similar setup with the dark red and green well. We do not believe there will be interaction in those wells. In the situation with the blue well, it's produced significant volumes of hydrocarbon, and so it moving further to the west increases the possibility that there will be interaction. And so we would just like to minimize that, again, protecting the rights of our working interest partners and mineral owners there.
Okay. And can we go to the figure that has the fracture half length? That's C, I believe.
Well, let's see if I can get it.
See?
Oh gosh, let's see. And we
Okay, this
this one, sorry.
this microseismic study you did here, where was that done and in what lithology? Was it the same producing unit?
It was conducted to the southwest of here. Is actually a microseismic experiment that I believe Newfield conducted, and we were Axia, I believe, was a partner in that well, which we have then inherited from them. I would have to look at the exact formation of that. It is here in the lower Green River Wasatch, and we believe that generally from fracture growth in the lower Green River and Wasatch formations here is generally fairly comparable in geometry.
So you feel confident that this fracture pattern would be similar to where you're looking at in your current request?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, do you have any closing arguments you'd like to make?
I just briefly, if I could. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen, for appearing today, and thank you again, everyone here, for setting this up. It's quite a process, and I appreciate it. In closing, I'll be brief. There can be little doubt that granting this exception location will maximize resource recovery and prevent waste. That's fairly clear from what's been presented today. But I think what's less clear, and I think what's important to address, is that allowing this exception location will also protect correlative rights. As we get closer and closer to section lines, the automatic concern is that it will impact offset owners in a negative way. And I think in this situation, it's important to remember, as the hearing examiner noted, these working interest partners have interests in both wells, but they don't have equal interests in both wells. And so at some level, what they understand as operators is this well, even if it has to go to 460 feet, which we're not sure that it will go to 460 feet, is the best way operationally to be managing Section 3031, and it doesn't do it in a way that impacts them in 29 and 32. And I guess a different way of saying that is today, anyone whose rights would need to be protected has either signed written consent expressly supporting this exception location or has not responded yet and will have the opportunity to do so should they choose to do so. In sum, granting XCL's request will further the state's policies of maximizing resource recovery, preventing waste, and protecting correlative rights. XCL has met all statutory and regulatory burdens. This request, in short, will ensure the orderly development of the subject lands and is just and reasonable and in keeping with standard practice in the basin. With that, we'd ask the hearing examiner to recommend approval of the request to the board.
Thank you,
Oh,
In terms of summation? Again, yeah, I think the division supports this request. The board has the authority to grant this request. And again, I appreciate all the testimony we heard from XCL today and everybody who helped put the hearing on as well. So thank you.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, if I might, Julianne just reminded me we need to admit exhibits first before we move on. I'd like to move for admission of our exhibits A through H.
And just to clarify, those are not, you're not referencing anything in the RAA.
I'm not, but I'm happy to admit the RAA exhibits as exhibits if that would be preferred.
How would you, I think just Exhibit C would be helpful.
Okay, I can, if you'd like, I can submit it as a supplemental exhibit after this hearing for inclusion for what the board
Okay, yeah.
gets in the record.
That works.
So I'd like to move at this time for admission of exhibits A through H as presented in petitioner exhibits. I also would like to move for the admission of Exhibit C as attached to the request for agency action, which will be filed as a supplemental exhibit following this hearing.
No objections.
So accepted.
Okay.
After reviewing this, I look at the number of people that have agreed to this, the over 99%, the idea that the fracture half length even is not even going to approach the offset to protect relative rights. I think we're safe there. And I think to give the XCL the flexibility to move a rig on there, and if things don't work out as planned, they have the opportunity to change and go forward with what they need to do to recover these reserves. I with this evidence, support the XLL Resources LLC request for exception location for the Butcher Butte, number 31, 144H, 21 well, subject to R641-113-500, the time constraints for response. So, Mr. Mayo, would you please prepare an order in this matter?
I will for sure, and I'll work with Mr. Kessinger to make sure it reflects what's here today. Is there, just for my purposes in terms of timing, is there a preferred, how final does it need to be? How quickly do we need it? Is this something the board likes to have well in advance of the hearing?
I think this should be something that is as soon as possible, but let's not rush it so that it's not complete by the time
Okay.
we're ready.
The end of this week is good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So they have time to review it before the hearing.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay. With that, we'll conclude this hearing. Thank you for participating, and I thought it went well over the internet here, so I'll save you a trip to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
You will.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Guys. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.